My dad emptied my college fund to pay his loans. The consequences were unbelievable. My dad stole my entire college fund to pay off his debts. But what he didn't know was that I had a plan to make him pay in the end. Want to know what happened next? Stick around, you won't believe the twist that changed everything. I had spent my entire life believing that if I worked hard enough, stayed disciplined, and made smart choices, I could carve out a future on my own terms. It wasn't just ambition, it was survival. I had grown up watching my father, Donald, treat money like a game, gambling away paychecks, making reckless investments, spinning excuses every time the bills piled up. I swore I'd never be like him. I had planned, saved, fought tooth and nail for every dollar in my college fund. And now, in a single phone call, he had stolen all of it. Just like that. You didn't really need it anyway. Donald's voice crackled through the receiver, casual, almost amused. Besides, what's done is done. No point in getting upset about it now. My stomach turned. The sheer audacity. The way he spoke, like he had just borrowed a few bucks for coffee, not wiped out the future. I had spent years building. I forced myself to stay calm. How much is left? He let out a dry chuckle. Left? None of it, honey. I had some debts to clear up, but don't worry, you're smart. You'll figure something out. Like it was that easy. Like I hadn't already worked 2 jobs, secured scholarships, and lived on the bare minimum just to make it this far. The money wasn't some luxury, it was everything. It was tuition, rent, food, a lifeline. I gripped the phone so tightly my knuckles ached. That wasn't yours to take. His tone hardened. Don't get dramatic, Rachel. It's not like I did this to hurt you. Families help each other, and I needed help. I closed my eyes, taking a slow breath, trying to push down the rage boiling inside me. It was always the same with him: deflect, justify, minimize. I had spent my whole life watching him pull the same tricks on my mother, my grandmother, anyone who had the misfortune of trusting him. And now, he had done it to me. Donald sighed, as if I were the one being unreasonable. Look, let's not make this a big deal, okay? College isn't going anywhere. Maybe this is a sign you should take a break, get some real-world experience. Hell, I know some guys who could get you a good job. Better money than whatever degree you're chasing. I almost laughed. A bitter, hollow sound. He thought this was about the money. He thought this was about tuition. He didn't understand it was about everything. Every sleepless night, every sacrifice, every moment I had spent proving to myself that I wouldn't end up like him. And now, he had tried to take that away. A text buzzed through my phone. I glanced down. Don't mention this to your mother or grandmother. No need to worry them, of course. He didn't want them to know. Just like he hadn't wanted them to know about the gambling, the failed businesses, the endless cycle of borrowing and never repaying. He wanted me to stay quiet, to let it go, to make it easy for him. I exhaled slowly, setting my phone down on the desk beside my laptop. I stared at the screen, the spreadsheet I had been working on just moments ago now seeming utterly pointless. 3 months. That was all I had left before the next semester's tuition was due. 3 months to figure out how to salvage everything he had destroyed. I could already hear the doubt creeping in. The fear. Maybe he was right. Maybe there was no way to fix this. Maybe I should just give up. No. My fingers curled into fists. No. I had spent too long clawing my way toward a future he had just carelessly burned to the ground. He thought I would just accept it, just move on, just swallow the betrayal like everyone else had. He had no idea who he was dealing with. I turned back to my laptop and opened a blank document. If he wanted to turn this into a game, fine. I would play. Step 1, documentation. Bank statements, proof of deposits, screenshots of his texts, anything that could paint a clear picture of what had happened. Step 2, legal research. Could I fight this? Could I get the money back? Was there any loophole, any legal avenue that could hold him accountable? Step 3. Emergency funding. Could I apply for aid? Find a part-time job? Anything that would keep me afloat for just one more year? My father had spent his life playing the system, bending the rules, talking his way out of consequences. But I wasn't like him. I didn't cut corners. I didn't lie. I didn't steal. And that's why, in the end, I would win. My phone buzzed again. Another message. You worry too much. Just let it go. I smiled to myself. Not this time. I took a screenshot, then another. I saved every piece of evidence, my mind already spinning ahead to my next step. Could I report this? Could I get the bank to reverse the charges? I dug through my files, finding the original account paperwork from when I had opened my college fund. My father's name was still listed as a co-signer. Legally, he had access to it. Legally, I didn't have a case. My hands clenched into fists. He had planned this. He had known exactly how to take my money without any real consequences. And worst of all, I had let him. I had been so focused on school, on my future, on trusting that my own father wouldn't betray me, that I had never thought to remove his name from the account. That was my mistake. One I wouldn't make again. I picked up my phone, dialing my bank. A woman with a calm, professional voice answered, and I forced myself to sound composed as I explained the situation. I knew the answer before she even gave it to me. "I'm so sorry, Miss Calloway," she said gently. "Since your father was a co-signer on the account, he had legal authority to withdraw those funds. Unfortunately, that means we won't be able to dispute the charges." I swallowed hard. What about fraud? If I can prove that he took the money for personal use, I understand, but because his name was on the account, it's not considered fraudulent in the legal sense. My father had always known how to work the system, how to manipulate rules just enough to get away with things. But if he thought I was just going to roll over and accept this, he was dead wrong. "Thank you for your time," I said, keeping my voice steady as I ended the call. I leaned back in my chair, pressing my fingers against my temples. There had to be another way. If I couldn't get my money back through the bank, then I needed to find another way to survive. Scholarships? I had already maxed out every possible grant. Student loans? Maybe, but they wouldn't come fast enough. A second job? I was already working 20 hours a week on top of school. I needed to think bigger. I pulled up my school's emergency aid options, scanning through every possible avenue of financial assistance. Most of them required proof of hardship. I had that. I just needed to present it the right way. A knock on my door startled me. I turned to see my roommate, Emma, leaning against the frame, her brows knitted together. "I heard you pacing," she said, her voice soft. "What's going on?" I hesitated. Emma and I weren't just roommates, we were friends. But I wasn't used to sharing my problems. I had spent my whole life solving things on my own. Still, as I looked at her concerned face, the weight of everything pressed down on me all at once. "My father stole my college fund," I said, the words tasting bitter on my tongue. Emma's eyes widened. "What? Like all of it?" I nodded. She let out a low whistle, shaking her head. "Jesus. Can you report him?" I let out a humorless laugh. Legally, he had access to it. So, no. Emma sat on the edge of my bed, crossing her arms. "That's insane. What are you gonna do?" I exhaled slowly, staring at my laptop. "I don't know yet, but I'm not letting him get away with it." A beat of silence. Then, Emma leaned forward, her voice firm. "If you need anything, money, help, whatever, you let me know, okay?" Something tightened in my chest. Gratitude. I wasn't used to people offering help. I wasn't used to needing it. "I appreciate it," I said quietly. Emma nodded, giving my shoulder a reassuring squeeze before heading back to her room. I turned back to my laptop, my determination hardening into something sharper. If the bank wouldn't help me, if the law wouldn't help me, then I would help myself. I clicked open a new email and started typing. Subject: Urgent financial aid request. I didn't just explain the situation. I laid it all out in brutal detail. The years of savings, the part-time jobs, the scholarships, the betrayal. I attached my bank statements, the withdrawal records, the text messages from my father. I wasn't asking for pity. I was proving that I had done everything right, and I had still been robbed. By the time I hit send, my hands were trembling, not with fear, with adrenaline, because this wasn't over. Not even close. You won't believe what he did next. With everything I've been through, I was ready to make him pay, but did he give in or get even more desperate? Drop a 111 if you think I'll win this fight, or at Woo 22 foot if you think he'll still find a way out. I refreshed my email for what had to be the 100th time, my fingers drumming against the desk. No response. Not yet. It had only been a few hours since I sent the financial aid request, but every passing second felt like a lifetime. My stomach churned with unease. I knew I had done everything I could, laid out every piece of evidence, but there was still a sinking feeling in my chest that told me it might not be enough. Bureaucracy didn't care about betrayal. Rules didn't make exceptions for people like me. I leaned back in my chair, rubbing my temples. This wasn't just about tuition. This was about survival. If I didn't secure funding, I'd have no choice but to drop out. And if I dropped out, I'd have to move back home. Back to the place where my father would act like nothing had happened, where he'd smirk and say, "I told you, you'd figure something out," as if he hadn't been the reason I was drowning in the first place. No, that wasn't an option. I needed a backup plan. I grabbed my notebook, flipping to a fresh page. My mind ran through every possible scenario. Scholarships? I had exhausted those. Student loans? That was a last resort, but I couldn't take on tens of thousands in debt overnight. Part-time jobs? I was already maxed out with my current workload. There had to be another way. My phone buzzed on the desk, making me jump. My heart pounded as I grabbed it, but the second I saw the name on the screen, my stomach twisted into knots. Dad. I stared at it, my hands tightening into fists. He hadn't called since our last conversation, since the moment he had casually admitted to draining my savings, like it was nothing more than a minor inconvenience. And now, when he knew I was backed into a corner, he was reaching out. I let it ring. When it stopped, a voicemail popped up. I hesitated for half a second before pressing play. "Hey, sweetheart." Donald's voice came through, smooth as ever, like he hadn't just shattered my entire future. "I know you're probably upset right now, but I want you to know it wasn't personal. I had no choice. You wouldn't understand, but sometimes life forces your hand." My grip tightened around the phone. "I know you'll figure something out. You always do. That's why I never worried about you," he continued. "But listen, I think this could actually be a good thing. Maybe a little break from school wouldn't be so bad. You could come home for a while, reset, get some real-world experience. I even know some people who could hook you up with a good job, something where you don't have to stress about all this college nonsense." I nearly threw my phone across the room. College nonsense. He had stolen my future, and now he was acting like he had done me a favor. The voicemail continued. "Anyway, don't do anything stupid, all right? And whatever you do, don't go crying to your grandmother. She doesn't need to be dragged into this." There it was, the real reason for the call. He wasn't worried about me. He was worried about himself. I took a slow, deep breath, trying to steady my hands. I had been debating whether or not to bring my grandmother into this mess. She was the only person my father had ever feared, the only person who had ever held him accountable. But I had hesitated. I had told myself I could handle it on my own. Now I knew exactly what I had to do. I clicked out of the voicemail, pulled up my contacts, and tapped the number I had been avoiding. The phone barely rang twice before she picked up. "Rachel?" My grandmother's voice was sharp, alert. I swallowed the lump in my throat. "Grandma, I need to tell you something." There was a beat of silence. Then, in the firmest, most unwavering voice I had ever heard, she said, "I'm listening." And just like that, the game had changed. I sat on the edge of my bed, gripping my phone like it was the only thing keeping me grounded. My grandmother's words still echoed in my head, sharp, unwavering, laced with a quiet fury that sent chills down my spine. "He did what?" she had asked, her voice low and dangerous. I had told her everything, every last detail of how my father had stolen my future out from under me. There had been a long pause on the other end of the line, and then, with the kind of resolve that could shake mountains, she had said, "This isn't over. He thinks he's won. He's wrong." I exhaled slowly, my pulse hammering. I wasn't sure what my grandmother planned to do, but I knew one thing: she wasn't the kind of woman to sit back and let injustice slide. And Donald? He'd always underestimated her, just like he had underestimated me. I pulled up my bank app, staring at the empty balance that once held my entire future. My tuition, my security, my hard-earned independence gone. I clenched my jaw, resisting the urge to throw my phone across the room. If my father thought he could take everything from me and walk away unscathed, he was about to learn just how wrong he was. A sharp knock at my door pulled me out of my spiraling thoughts. I stood, smoothing my hands down my jeans before opening it. Emma stood there, arms crossed, her expression somewhere between concern and barely restrained fury. "Tell me you're not just sitting in here stewing," she said, pushing past me into the room. "Because if you are, I'm going to need you to stand up and get mad." I let out a dry laugh, shutting the door behind her. "Oh, I'm mad. Trust me." Emma flopped onto my bed, watching me carefully. "So what's the plan?" I ran a hand through my hair, pacing. "First, I lock down every account he has access to. Grandma's already in on this, and she's not letting this slide. I don't know what she's planning, but she's furious." Emma smirked. "Good. I've only met your grandmother once, and she scared the hell out of me. I like that she's on our side." I grabbed my laptop, opening up my financial statements. I need to document everything, every transfer, every withdrawal, every single dollar that disappeared. If there's a legal way to fight this, I need to be ready. Emma leaned forward. "You think you can get the money back?" I hesitated, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. "I don't know. But if I can't, then I'll make damn sure he never does this to anyone else." Emma let out a low whistle. "I like this version of you, cold, calculated, vengeful." I shot her a look. "I don't have a choice." "Exactly," she said, standing up. "That's why you're going to win." I wasn't sure about winning. Not yet. But I knew one thing: Donald had spent his life taking from people and getting away with it. This time, he wouldn't. The next morning, I woke to a text from my grandmother. "Call me. It's handled." I blinked at my screen, my heart pounding. Handled? I wasted no time dialing her number. She picked up on the second ring. "Rachel," she said, her voice crisp, businesslike. "Your father called me last night." I gripped my phone tighter. And he had the audacity to act surprised when I told him I knew everything. There was a pause, and then, with a slight edge of amusement, she added, I believe his exact words were, "Mom, this is a private matter." I scoffed. Of course he said that. He was hoping I'd stay quiet. He was wrong. I could practically hear the steel in her voice. "I told him he had two choices," she continued. "He could return every last cent he stole, or I could make his life very, very difficult." A rush of adrenaline shot through me. And what did he say? He tried to talk his way out of it. Excuses. Justifications. He even had the gall to say you were overreacting. My grip tightened, and I reminded him that this wasn't just about you, she said, her voice calm but dangerous. "Rachel, he's been taking from everyone for years. Your uncle, your aunt, even me." I froze. "What?" Her sigh was heavy. "I never told you because I didn't want you to carry that burden. But now, it's time he faces the consequences." My head spun. This wasn't just about me. This was bigger. "What do we do?" I asked, my voice steady. "We make him regret it," she said simply. "I've already spoken to Lisa. Lisa, my aunt. The family's no-nonsense lawyer." I let out a breath. "And? You let us handle the legal side. You focus on making sure he never gets the chance to do this again." I sat down on the edge of my bed, my pulse racing. For the first time since this nightmare started, I felt something other than anger. I felt power. My father had spent his life treating people like stepping stones, using them until they had nothing left to give. But this time he had finally messed with the wrong people. I sat at my desk, staring at my laptop screen as if sheer willpower could make the numbers change. The reality hadn't shifted. My bank account was still empty, my tuition still unpaid, and my father still walking around without a single consequence for what he had done. My grandmother had shaken him. Lisa was lining up the legal angles. But I knew better than to assume Donald would back down. He never did. If there was one thing I had learned from a lifetime of being his daughter, it was that my father only respected power. And if he thought I was weak, that I would roll over and let him get away with this. Then he was in for a hell of a surprise. A knock on my bedroom door made me look up. Emma stood there, arms crossed, a determined expression on her face. "Okay," she said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. "I gave you space to process. Now I'm here to make sure you don't do anything stupid. Or, alternatively, that you do something extremely stupid, but strategically." I let out a dry laugh. I don't even know what strategically stupid looks like. Emma flopped onto my bed, propping herself up on her elbows. "Well, let's think. We know Donald thrives on manipulation. He's not going to admit to what he did unless he has no other choice. We also know that legally, things are moving, but lawsuits take time. So what's the fastest way to make a man like your father panic?" I stared at her, the wheels in my mind turning. Then it hit me. His reputation. Emma snapped her fingers. Bingo. I exhaled sharply, leaning back in my chair. He's been feeding lies to our relatives, trying to make me out to be the villain. If I don't take control of the narrative, he's going to bury me. Emma nodded. Exactly. And while you're doing that, I'm going to do some digging. If he drained your college fund, where did the money go? I rubbed my temples, frustration bubbling under my skin. Gambling? Failed business ventures? I don't know. It wouldn't be the first time. Emma tilted her head. Then let's find out. The next few days were a whirlwind of controlled chaos. While Lisa handled the legal angle, I took my fight public. I didn't go to the press. Not yet. I wasn't ready for that level of attention. But I did reach out to every relative, every family friend who had been fed my father's lies. I sent them the proof, the bank statements, the text messages, the sheer audacity of his theft laid out in black and white. Some refused to believe it. Some hesitated, caught between loyalty and undeniable evidence. And then there were those who knew exactly what I was talking about because they had been his victims too. "Rachel, my Uncle Mark said when I called him," his voice wary, "What's this about your dad taking your tuition money?" I swallowed the lump in my throat. It's exactly what it sounds like. He stole from me. He took everything. Mark let out a slow exhale. Damn it. I should have seen this coming. My heart pounded. "What do you mean?" There was a long pause, and then he said, "He did the same thing to me, years ago. Borrowed money, promised he'd pay it back, then disappeared when the debts caught up." I closed my eyes, gripping the phone tighter. "Did you ever get it back?" A bitter chuckle. "Of course not." I felt something shift inside me, a cold, calculating fury. This wasn't just about me anymore. Donald had been doing this for years, taking from people who trusted him, and walking away without consequences. But this time, there would be consequences. By the end of the week, Emma had managed to track down exactly where my money had gone. And when she showed me, I almost laughed at the sheer stupidity of it. "A vacation?" I said, staring at the credit card statements. Emma smirked. "Not just any vacation. First-class tickets, 5-star hotels, luxury restaurants. The man drained your tuition to live like a king for a few weeks." I shook my head in disbelief. "So, while I was working 3 jobs to make ends meet, he was sipping cocktails on a beach somewhere?" "Pretty much," Emma said. Then, with a wicked glint in her eye, she added, "You know, people love a good scandal." I met her gaze, my pulse quickening. What are you saying? She tossed her phone onto the bed. I'm saying we have receipts. And if you wanted to, I don't know. Let the world know exactly what kind of man he is. Well, I wouldn't stop you. I hesitated, the weight of the decision pressing down on me. Taking this public would mean war. But then again, my father had already declared war the moment he stole my future. I picked up my phone, my fingers hovering over the screen. Then, without another second of hesitation, I started typing. My father stole my college fund and used it to finance a luxury vacation while telling me to figure something out for my tuition. I have the proof. Let's talk about financial abuse. I attached the statements, took a deep breath, and hit post. The internet did the rest. I stared at my phone screen, heart pounding as I scrolled through the avalanche of comments. My post had gone viral. It wasn't just my family talking about it anymore. Strangers, financial experts, and even a few reporters were weighing in. Some people offered sympathy. Others shared their own horror stories of financial betrayal. But the most powerful response came from those who had been fooled by my father before. Donald Calloway borrowed money from me years ago and never paid it back. I thought I was the only one. He scammed my uncle out of an investment deal. This man has been playing people for decades. The more people spoke up, the clearer the pattern became. My father wasn't just a liar or a thief. He was a con artist. And now, for the first time, he was losing control of his own story. Then came the text from Lisa. Lisa, we need to talk. Now. I barely had time to respond before my phone rang. Lisa? I answered, my voice tight with anticipation. He's panicking, she said without preamble. We just got word he's been calling around, trying to do damage control. He even tried to spin it to Grandma, saying you exaggerated and that it was just a misunderstanding. I exhaled sharply, gripping the edge of my desk. Of course he did. Doesn't matter, Lisa continued. She didn't buy it, and neither did the rest of the family. But here's the kicker, he's running out of options. He called a lawyer. My stomach twisted. A lawyer? Lisa's voice was calm, but there was an edge of steel beneath it. He's threatening to sue you for defamation. For a split second, I almost laughed. Of course, that was his next move. When backed into a corner, my father always played the victim. He'd spent his entire life avoiding accountability, turning things around on the people he hurt. And now that he couldn't manipulate me in private, he was trying to scare me into silence. But he underestimated me. Let him, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Lisa paused. You sure? He stole my tuition, I said. He lied to our family. He spent years using people. If he wants to take this to court, we'll take it to court. I have receipts, Lisa. And I'm done playing nice. There was a beat of silence. Then she let out a small chuckle. You're scary when you're like this. I love it. I smirked. Good. Because I'm not backing down. The next few days were a whirlwind. Lisa filed a counterclaim, making it clear that if my father wanted to play legal games, we were prepared to expose everything. Meanwhile, Emma and I kept digging, piecing together a timeline of his scams. The deeper we went, the uglier it got. He hadn't just drained my college fund, he had taken money from business associates, borrowed from friends without paying them back, even convinced one of my cousins to co-sign on a loan. He never intended to repay. And through it all, he had maintained the same charming, easygoing persona, making everyone believe that their loss was just an unfortunate mishap. But now, his victims were comparing notes. And that was his worst nightmare. The real turning point came when a journalist reached out. Reporter, I came across your post and started looking into your father's history. Would you be willing to speak on the record? I stared at the message, my pulse quickening. Going public was a risk. It meant turning this from a family dispute into a full-blown scandal. But it also meant exposing him in a way he couldn't escape. I took a deep breath and typed my response. Let's talk. That night, I sat down for an interview. I told the truth, every ugly, infuriating detail of how my father had stolen from me, manipulated my family, and left me scrambling to salvage my future. I didn't hold back, and neither did the journalist. By the time the article was published, it wasn't just my father's reputation that was crumbling, it was his entire house of cards. His business partners pulled out of deals. Old acquaintances started coming forward with their own accusations. And then, finally, the moment I had been waiting for an official investigation into his finances. He had spent his whole life thinking he was untouchable. But now, for the first time, reality was catching up to him, and I had front row seats to his downfall. The pressure was mounting. I could feel it in my chest as I sat at my desk, the cold light from my computer screen casting long shadows in the dim apartment. Every buzz of my phone made my heart skip a beat. New messages, new updates, more people reaching out with news I wasn't ready for. And then I saw it, the email. The subject line alone sent a chill through me. Urgent, legal action, Donald Calloway's response. I clicked it open, and my fingers froze on the keyboard. The tone of his email was so damn casual, so indifferent to the destruction he had caused, that it took everything in me not to scream. He was already spinning his own version of events, claiming he was misunderstood and that I was just overreacting. My stomach churned. I could see the narrative he was trying to craft, twisting the truth, as he always had. He was turning me into the villain, trying to make it seem like I was the one at fault for bringing the family into it. He wasn't even sorry. He wasn't even remotely remorseful. My phone buzzed again, and I glanced at the message. Lisa, he's trying to make it look like you're the one who's in the wrong. Are you prepared for this? I swallowed hard, fingers gripping the phone tighter. Prepared didn't even begin to cover it. I had been preparing for this moment for weeks, maybe even longer. But seeing it laid out in front of me, seeing him once again trying to rewrite history and make himself the innocent victim, it hit harder than I expected. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was about something much deeper, control. He thought he could control the situation. He thought he could manipulate me into staying quiet, playing the daughter who would forgive him and let him off the hook. He was wrong. I took a deep breath, clearing my mind. I couldn't afford to let his words get to me. Not now. Not when everything was finally starting to fall into place. My phone rang again. I glanced at the screen. My mother. I hadn't spoken to her since this whole mess began, and even though I knew I had to deal with it, I wasn't ready. Not yet. But she wasn't going to let me avoid this conversation forever. I picked up the phone. Hey, Mom. Rachel, she said, her voice shaking, but not with fear, no. This was anger. I just got off the phone with Donald. I could hear her breath catch in her throat. What did he say? I asked, my heart racing. He's trying to make you out to be the bad guy. Her voice cracked. He said he was just helping you, that he'd intended to pay you back. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell her that it was all a lie, that he had drained my college fund without any intention of repaying me. But I held it together, for her. I know, I whispered, swallowing the lump in my throat. I've been dealing with that for days. But we're not done yet. There was a pause. I could feel her hesitation. I don't want you to think that I'm siding with him, Rachel, she said quietly, but I don't know what to believe anymore. I closed my eyes, taking a deep breath. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about our entire family. And my father had spent his entire life creating a web of lies so tangled that no one could tell the truth from the fiction. My mother, my aunt, even my grandmother, they were all torn between loyalty and the truth. I'm not backing down, I said, forcing the words out even though I wasn't sure how I was going to handle this next step. This has gone too far. He can't keep getting away with it. I know, my mother replied, her voice shaking with emotion. But you've got to be careful, Rachel. He's dangerous. He's always been dangerous. I knew she was right. I knew he was capable of anything. But this time, I wasn't the scared little girl trying to keep the peace. This time, I was the one fighting for the future he had stolen. I'm done letting him control me, Mom, I said firmly. I'm done being afraid of him. I'm proud of you, she whispered. Just be careful. I will, I promised. And then I hung up. I needed to act fast. I couldn't afford to waste another minute. I pulled up the legal documents Lisa had sent me earlier that morning, proof of everything. From the fraudulent withdrawals to the bank statements that showed exactly how my father had bled my savings dry. I had everything I needed. Now, I had to make sure I used it the right way. It wasn't going to be easy, I knew that. But if my father thought he could keep twisting the truth, he was about to learn a very harsh lesson. I glanced at my phone again. Another email this time from the reporter I'd spoken to earlier. Reporter, we've confirmed everything. We're going public with this. I felt a surge of adrenaline rush through me. This was it. This was the moment when everything changed. I hit reply. Me. Let's do it. With that, my father's empire of lies began to crumble. I stood in the kitchen, staring at the phone in my hand, my heart pounding. I could hear my father's voice, smooth and practiced, as if he had orchestrated this moment from the very beginning. He knew exactly what buttons to push, how to manipulate the situation, how to make me question myself. But this time, it wasn't going to work. I wasn't the naive little girl I once was. I wasn't afraid of him anymore. His latest move was a desperate one. He had tried to spin the narrative again, to make me look like the villain in this story. He called, saying he was just trying to help and that I was overreacting. That same old line. I could almost hear the smirk on his face as he said it. But I wasn't buying it this time. I wasn't going to let him worm his way back into my life with his empty promises and his manipulation. The phone buzzed again. This time, it was my lawyer, Lisa. I almost didn't want to answer, but I knew I had to. Rachel, she said, her voice calm but carrying that undercurrent of urgency that I had come to expect from her. I just wanted to update you. Your father's response, it's exactly what we expected. But this is going to work in our favor. We've got him cornered. I swallowed hard. My mind raced. He was getting desperate and I could feel it. Every move he made, every lie he told, was just him trying to claw his way out of the hole he had dug for himself. But I was done helping him. I was done cleaning up his mess. I'm ready, I said, my voice tight, but steady. Let's do this. No more running. Lisa was quiet for a moment. I could hear her typing, probably drafting the next legal move. We're ready to go public. We're filing the lawsuit tomorrow. You've got everything we need, everything. The proof was in my hands. The bank statements, the text messages, the records of every stolen dollar. I had worked hard for every cent I had, and now my father had stripped it all away. He hadn't just stolen money, he had stolen my future, and he wasn't going to get away with it. I paced the kitchen, staring out the window at the city below. I loved this place. I had fought for this life, for my independence. This was my home, my city. I had worked so hard to get here, and now I wasn't going to let anyone, especially not my father, take it away. The phone buzzed again. This time, it was a text message from my mother. I hesitated, staring at the screen. Part of me wanted to ignore it, pretend everything was fine. But I couldn't. I owed her more than that. I owed her the truth. I spoke to your father. He's asking for another chance. He's saying it was all a mistake. Please, Rachel, don't do this. I felt the anger rise up in my chest. How many chances had I given him? How many times had I allowed him to manipulate me into forgiving him? No more. I wasn't going to be his punching bag any longer. I didn't respond. Instead, I typed out a message to Lisa. Let's go public. It's time. I hit send and let out a shaky breath. My phone rang almost immediately. It was Lisa. We're ready. I've got everything lined up. The press is waiting. Once we file the lawsuit, it's going to be all over the news. Your father's days of hiding behind lies are over. I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. Do it. And just like that, I could feel the weight lift off my shoulders. For the first time in what felt like forever, I was in control. I wasn't just reacting to him anymore, I was taking action. I was going to make sure he couldn't hurt anyone else again. The phone buzzed one last time. I stared at the screen, my breath catching in my throat. It was from my father. "You don't understand. This is your last chance. If you go through with this, you'll ruin everything. You'll ruin your family." I felt my hands shake as I read the message. I had seen this before, his attempts to guilt me into submission, to make me believe that I was the one who was in the wrong. But not this time. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. I had already made my decision. The phone buzzed one more time, but I ignored it. I wasn't going to let him drag me back into his web. Instead, I turned to the window and stared out at the city, feeling the weight of everything settle into place. This was it, the moment I had been waiting for. Tomorrow, my father would face the consequences. And for the first time, I wasn't afraid. I woke up to the sound of my phone vibrating on the nightstand, the familiar notification tone echoing through my quiet apartment. I groggily reached for it, half expecting it to be more legal updates or texts from my family. But this time, it was something different, a news alert. The headline screamed at me as I opened my eyes fully. "Local businessman arrested in financial fraud investigation." My heart skipped a beat as I scanned the text. There, in black and white, was my father's name, followed by details of his arrest for embezzling funds. The very man who had spent his life lying, manipulating, and stealing from those closest to him was finally facing the consequences of his actions. I stared at the phone in disbelief for a moment. It felt surreal. This wasn't how I had imagined it would happen. Did anyone ever picture a moment like this in their life? A moment where everything they fought for, every sacrifice they made, came crashing down in the most dramatic of ways? I didn't know if I should feel relieved, vindicated, or afraid. Maybe all of them. A loud knock on the door snapped me back to reality. I looked at the time, 9:00 a.m. It was too early for a visit, especially given everything that had happened over the past few days. I felt a familiar tension settle in my stomach as I stood up, my feet dragging as I walked to the door. Rachel? It was Lisa, my aunt, the one person who had been standing by me through every step of this ordeal. I didn't have to ask how she knew about the news. She had likely been following every move of this case as closely as I had, if not more. I opened the door and stood aside, letting her in. She wasted no time. "It's happening," she said, her voice steady but urgent. "He's been arrested. But this is just the beginning. We need to stay sharp, stay focused. He'll try to fight this with everything he has. The media, the family, anyone who'll listen. He won't go down without a fight." I nodded, though a part of me felt a strange calm wash over me. I had been waiting for this moment for so long, yet now that it was here, I wasn't sure what came next. It was all happening so fast, too fast, even for me. I thought I was ready, but deep down, I realized that the real fight was just beginning. It wasn't enough for him to be caught. It wasn't enough for him to face the legal consequences. He would try to destroy me in ways I couldn't even predict. I could already feel the weight of the battle that lay ahead. I took a deep breath and sat down on the couch, my mind racing as Lisa sat across from me. "What now?" I asked, feeling the reality of everything hitting me like a ton of bricks. The adrenaline had been the only thing propelling me forward, and now that the initial shock had worn off, I was left with the looming question, what was the next move? "Now," Lisa began, her eyes intense, "we make sure he stays down. We make sure he can't hurt anyone else. We keep pushing until the full weight of his actions is felt by everyone who has ever supported him." I nodded, determined but aware of the long road ahead. I had always known that my father would never go quietly. He had spent his entire life manipulating others, getting out of sticky situations by using charm and lies. Now that he was caught, I didn't expect him to just give up. But something about this felt different. This time, he was facing consequences that he couldn't talk his way out of. The phone buzzed again, and I picked it up without hesitation. It was a text from my mother. She had been silent for a while ever since the lawsuit had been filed. Things had been tense between us. I braced myself for whatever she had to say, unsure of how this latest news would affect her. Rachel, I saw the news. I know you've been fighting for this, but I can't help but feel like everything is falling apart. Are you sure this is the right thing to do? The family, we're already torn apart. How much more destruction can we take? I stared at the message for a long time, my hands shaking as I typed a response. My mother's fear was understandable. She had lived through years of my father's lies, and now that it had all come crashing down, the weight of it was threatening to break her. But I couldn't back down now. I couldn't let her or anyone else think that this was my fault. I had done nothing wrong. I'm doing what's right. This isn't just about him, it's about me, about what I deserve. This is my life, my future. I'm not going to let him destroy it anymore. I hit send and put the phone down. I knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. My mother might not understand. My family might fall apart even more than it already had. But this was my fight. I wasn't about to back down, no matter how hard it got. Lisa's voice cut through my thoughts. He'll try to manipulate the press. He'll try to spin this story, make it all about how he's been wronged. We need to stay ahead of that. Get your statement out. We need to control the narrative before he can. This is your time to speak the truth. I took a deep breath, nodded, and stood up. I had been preparing for this moment for months. It wasn't just about the lawsuit or the money, it was about reclaiming my life, my dignity, my future. And I wasn't going to let him steal that from me again. Hours later, I sat in front of my laptop, drafting the statement I knew would be the final piece in this chapter of my life. I had made it through the worst of it. I had fought back when it seemed like no one else would. And now, with this statement, I was going to take control. I was going to take my life back. Sometimes the hardest thing is standing up for yourself when everyone else is telling you to back down. I wrote, my fingers flying over the keys. But in the end, it's worth it. The truth always comes out. And this time, it's my truth, not his. I hit send. And for the first time in my life, I felt truly free. The truth always comes out, but sometimes it takes a fight to make it happen. Do you think I was right to stand my ground? Or do you think I should have done something differently? Hit the comments and share your thoughts. This isn't just my story, it's a lesson for everyone. The lesson I learned from all of this is simple: trust is something you must protect at all costs. My father took advantage of my hard work, my savings, my future, and for a long time, I let him. But standing up for yourself is not just a right, it's necessary for your own survival. Don't let anyone take what you've built, even if it's family. If someone betrays you, fight for what's yours, even when it's hard. Your future is worth more than their lies.